to get a chance to come and talk to you. You know, I love to come when I'm invited by Felipe, because I know that you guys learned a lot from him. I've learned a lot from him, no question about it. I enjoy actually talking tough issues through with him. And I always appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to his classes. As he indicated, I'm a law professor, and I grew up in Indianapolis. Went to school in Indianapolis Public Schools in '74, graduated from North Central High School, went down to Indiana University where I did my undergraduate work in accounting, graduated in '78. Then I went to law school, graduated from Yale Law School in 1982, came back here, and at the time I came back here, I was the second black to work for a law firm any size in the state of Indiana. I don't think there was a Hispanic attorney who worked for any of the law firms here until the mid-90s. In '87, I went back to Bloomington to become a law professor, and that's what I've done the last 23 years, focusing primarily on race, law, and education. Now, I'm going to make an assumption as I start, because what Felipe asked me to do was in some sense to tell you the story of African Americans in the U.S. And therefore I'm going to assume that you don't know the story, or that you've heard the story, but you haven't heard the story from someone like me. So I'm going to tell you the story in some sense, because I think you got to understand the history to really understand the African American situation in this country today. So they're on the ship, and it takes 45 days to get them to the West Indies, or they came into Virginia. Virginia was a place where a lot of slaves came into, as was South Carolina. And after all of that, right, sold again. Okay, sold again. So now you got some new masters who have to teach new lessons, and they really have to drive their lessons down hard, because they're the ones who are going to sell you to the ultimate consumer. Where you understand, right? You the slave seller, and you're going to sell somebody to someone else. Well, you might have to warranty that this is a good slave who's going to listen, who's going to take good instructions. So that means you got to get that slave right. You got to make sure he's so afraid that whatever anybody tells him to do, he's going to do. So there's a whole new process of victimization that goes on once they get to either the West Indies or to America. And then let's just say they're in America. Then they get sold finally to the people who are going to buy them. And once they're sold to the people who are going to buy them, right, they're going to work. You're talking about people who are going to work from sun up, actually from a couple hours before sun up to a couple hours before sundown, 6 days a week. They get Sunday off because the slave masters are good Christians, right? The Sabbath is a day of rest. So you get Sunday off, but the rest of it is hell. Now I'm assuming you know about slavery once they get here. That is our creation story. That is how my people came to be. I mean, literally, that was the experience of our ancestors. So this is the way black people come to America. We are the product of the greatest eugenics experience in the history of humanity. And our ancestors suffered more than any single group of ancestors ever. But they suffered on the African continent, and then they suffered during the transition, and then they suffered once they got here. This is how we started. And And the transatlantic slave trade is eventually ended January 1 or December 31, 1807. I want to do this because, see, Felipe talked about the fact that where he first met me was after I took his brother on a trip through Ghana. And Ghana's a country that the British dominated during the transatlantic slave trade. And to the extent that you could pick out one country or one space where a lot of blacks' ancestors came from, it would have been through Ghana, through the British castle on the Ghanaian Atlantic coast, onto the West Indies and onto America, or on directly to America. And the reason I take the kids there, and it's primarily intended to be a trip for black kids that'll do two things for them. One, it'll show them what their life would have been like had their ancestors not been brought over here as slaves. And the second point is to give them a real good sense of what the experience of their ancestors really was. So what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to start by telling you the creation story of the African American people. In other words, this is the story about how we were created as a people. And right, keep in mind, in Africa, the black people who come over here to America were members from different countries, different ethnic tribes. What would happen is they would be pulled from different places through Africa, down into Ghana, down into here. Nigeria was another place for the transatlantic slave place of departure. But the black people in America came from 100 different villages and represented 1,000 different peoples. They were very, very different. But over here, they became African Americans. So what I'm going to tell you in as vivid a terms as I can is that creation story. This is how we came to be as a people. Effectively, it was like this. People would have been in their villages, and they would have been cooking their fires. They would have been with their friends, with their relatives, with their family members. They would have been enjoying life, hunting, fishing, raising food. Good life. You know, the women would be talking about the party that's going to go on. The guys would be talking about the beer that they were going to drink. I mean, basically a good life, not a lot of troubles. And then in the middle of this enjoyment, let me try this. No, I can't do this. Along come these raiders. Along come these guys to their villages. These black guys to their villages. They weren't their people. They were another people. And they would come and they would raid them. And let's say there'd be a couple of hundred of them. And they'd take everybody in the village. Okay, we have now come. You people in this village are now mine. You now belong to us. They would start the process of putting chains on them. And they start the process of beating and whipping, right? Because if you come and you grab a bunch of people in their village, you figure what, the biggest guy, so you'd be the biggest guy, you'd be the meanest guy, right? You wouldn't put up with it. So you say, okay, come on now. So the first thing you do is you kill him. And you kill him in front of everybody because you're sending a message. And the message is you're not going to tolerate any stuff. Now you might say, okay, well, you're his sister. Let's rape you in front of everybody. Let's say you're the mother. Let's rape you too. Because we're sending a message. This is a new day. We, the raiders, are now in control. You people now belong to us. And if anybody's got some lip about it, but you don't take lip. Oh, you don't like it? You don't smack them, and if they continue, just kill them. Because we're going to lose, right? I'm running the Raiders. I'm going to lose some of you. Because we got a long journey. I've captured you up here, and we got to go 600 miles before you're going to go and be sold. So I'm going to lose some of you along the way. So I might as well start now knocking a few off to teach the lesson. And this is how it starts. These happy people in their villages thinking about what they're going to do next week, thinking about what they're going to have as dinner, all of a sudden see their world change instantly. And now you start the process of the march. You start the process of the march. Up here to the coast is about 350 miles. And right, we've taken the people from the village, and now it's going to be a march. They're chained, and they're marching. And along the way, you're going to have some of them dragging, some complaining their feet are hurting. Women may be on their periods complaining that they have problems. Well, you're not listening to complaints, okay? So complaints get met with a slap, with a whip, whatever it's going to take. But you're not going to listen to complaints. And they walk. Okay, now the raiders who own them are going to ride the horses, but they're going to walk. And the ones who are too slow, and along the way, you do stop and you rest, and you go, here's the conversation, right? I, as one of the raiders, am going to have with my other co-raiders. He ain't going to make it. Look, he's slowing us down. You might as well just go, all right, then go ahead and kill him. Because there's no sense slowing him down. So he's dead. Okay, so that means I've lost 1, 2, 3 already. She's complaining. Well, look, why don't the 4 of you take her, rape her, and then bring her back? And if she's got something to say after that, we'll just get rid of her too. And this is the process as we take our 3 weeks to walk you down to the coast. This is going to be going on all along. Now, when you look at Ghana, all roads lead to Kamazi, because Kamazi was the center of the Ashanti Empire. And the Ashantis were the biggest slaving African group. So all the slaves had to come through Kamazi. So you got to first march them through Kamazi, where they're going to be taxed by the Ashanti king and queen for money. So you bring them through there, and you pay your tax. And now you continue to march. So they're still in the hands of the people who captured them. Now, some of them may be sold. Some of them may be sold. Of course, we're assuming this group isn't. But if you're sold, right, imagine what happens when you sell a slave to someone else. A new round of beatings begins, right? Because now you got a new owner, and the new owner's got to make sure you know that they are as mean and as wicked and as nasty as your old owners. But let's assume you weren't slave, you weren't sold. You finally get down to the coast. When you get to the coast, all the slaves had to be sold to the blacks at the coast called the Fonte. So the Fonte would buy you. And there's clearly going to be another round of beatings. So see this? Oh, we're not going to take that. Okay, so we send him out with 4 guys who just going to work him over. In fact, they're going to work him over in front of everybody else. Because the whole point about this, right, is to send a message. And the message is you are now property. And not only are you property, you're my property. And in fact, I got to lose some of you, right, because that's just the way it is. And if I victimize him, the rest of them get the message. It is not good to be a good-looking woman once you've been captured as a slave. Indeed, it's not good to be a good-looking guy once you've been captured as a slave. There are stories of African troops that would, African tribes that would put these blocks in the lips of the women. And by the time they were done, literally, the women's lips would be out to here. Because the goal was to make them so ugly that none of the other slavers would want them. But anyway, you're sold and beaten to the Fonte. Now, the Fonte, after they've had their way with you, take you to the European castles. And at this point, you're sold again. And you're sold to the Europeans. And the Europeans are doing the same thing. So they had a little, only for them, the torture was going to last a little longer. Because you effectively, once you got into the castles, you stayed in dungeons until the next ship came that was going to take you to the West Indies or to America. That meant they had a little more time to do their torturing, do their beating, do their weeding out process, right? And right, you understand, right? You're Europeans, you're selling slaves. Okay, let's say you sold some slaves, they got on the boat, or they got to the West Indies, or they got to America, and they caused trouble, they tried to rebel. So that comes back to you. Right, here's the ship owner of the slave that's going to transport your slaves. Go, last group of slaves you sold me, they tried to rebel. Oh, really? Yeah, and I got to have some money back. So, as they pay the money, because they got to compensate him for his loss, they're going, well, we got to make sure this next group of slaves we send get told better. So they're going to get beaten a little more. The women are going to get raped a little more. You go to this castle, and part of it's kind of surreal because the church would sit on top of the place where they were holding slaves. So the slaves would literally be physically under the church. And of course, after you were beaten or raped, the Europeans would go to the church and they'd pray for forgiveness and all would be forgiven. Okay. After this, you now get sold. And now you're going to be placed on the boats. Now understand what has happened to this point, right? Our little happy villagers up here have seen, by the time we get to this point, half of the people who were captured with them brutally killed. Brutally killed. Half the people were brutally killed. And you've been beaten a few times and raped a few times. You've been stuck in these dungeons. And some of those dungeons, actually the dungeon was no bigger than this room. So imagine 600 people in this room with no toilet. No. If you had to use it, you use it right there on the floor. They actually said when they went to clean out these pens that the feces was this high and had hardened that much on the floors. So after being in these pens for 30 days, right, you can imagine what the smell was like. And if somebody got sick, they're just throwing up over everybody else who's there. Now after that, here's the cruel part of it. They chain them up, they bring them out of the dungeons, and they're taking them to the boats. So this is the first time for a lot of them in 30 days, fresh air. They actually get to breathe fresh air, feel the wind on their face for the first time in 30 days. And then they get in these boats. And what they do is, they chain them to the floor. Okay, so one head is facing this way, the other one's head is facing that way, and that's the way they go. But they're chained so tight, they can't even turn over. Okay, once again, you got to use the bathroom, you use it there. Everybody's going to smell it. Somebody gets sick, right? And unfortunately, you're dead. But let's say the person next to you gets sick, and you're chained to them. Well, there's no place you're going to go. And you can scream. You know, you can scream to the Europeans, and if they come, because they don't really like to come down there because it smells so bad. But if they come down there because you are screaming, they're going to smack you a few times just to once again teach you a lesson. We don't want to hear it. You know, where you're trying to say, well, look, this guy's bleeding all over me. We don't want to hear it. So they're on the ship, and it takes 45 days to get them to the West Indies, or they came into Virginia. Virginia was a place where a lot of slaves came into, as was South Carolina. And after all of that, right, sold again. Okay, sold again. So now you got some new masters who have to teach new lessons, and they really have to drive their lessons down hard, because they're the ones who are going to sell you to the ultimate consumer. Where you understand, right? You the slave seller, and you're going to sell somebody to someone else. Well, you might have to warranty that this is a good slave who's going to listen, who's going to take good instructions. So that means you got to get that slave right. You got to make sure he's so afraid that whatever anybody tells him to do, he's going to do. So there's a whole new process of victimization that goes on once they get to either the West Indies or to America. And then let's just say they're in America. Then they get sold finally to the people who are going to buy them. And once they're sold to the people who are going to buy them, right, they're going to work. You're talking about people who are going to work from sun up, actually from a couple hours before sun up to a couple hours before sundown, 6 days a week. They get Sunday off because the slave masters are good Christians, right? The Sabbath is a day of rest. So you get Sunday off, but the rest of it is hell. Now I'm assuming you know about slavery once they get here. That is our creation story. That is how my people came to be. I mean, literally, that was the experience of our ancestors. So this is the way black people come to America. We are the product of the greatest eugenics experience in the history of humanity. And our ancestors suffered more than any single group of ancestors ever. But they suffered on the African continent, and then they suffered during the transition, and then they suffered once they got here. This is how we started. And the transatlantic slave trade is eventually ended January 1 or December 31, 1807. Now from that point, 1807, you go into a period of domestic slavery. There's still some illegal transatlantic slave trading going on. But generally speaking, it's been cut off in the Americas, right? Why do you cut it off? Right, you know, well, think about it. If you end the transatlantic slave trade and you own slaves, what happens to the value of your slaves? Go up, because there's no more of them. There's no more of them coming. So ending the transatlantic slave trade made all the slave owners wealthier. That's why they ended it. Indeed, you got this story, when they tell the story about abolition, because when we finally get to the north, it starts to end slavery.
The blue marker.
Okay. What they do, in Pennsylvania is always the best example of this, but it's kind of fascinating when you hear about it. What they did was they said, look, 20 years from now, all slaves will be free in Pennsylvania. And they were the first ones to adopt an abolition law. 20 years from now, all slaves will be free. And so what do you do if you're the owner of a slave as the 20-year date approaches? Right? You march your slaves down to some place in the South and you sell them. Right? You don't free them and lose all your money, right? You just, okay, that means you got to leave Pennsylvania. And this was the idea. This was the idea in the North. Gradual manumission, gradually abolishing the slaves means they go down south. We get rid of the black people. We get rid of the black people.
How much are they worth about them?
I think well, of course, once again, the ones who are worth the most money are your males ages 18 to 22. The ones who can work the hardest. Once they start getting over 22, once they start getting older, the value starts to drop. The kids are cheaper because you got to put all that. You got to spend all that money right before you can start recuperating some of your investment. Because these kids, you can't stick them out there in the field, or if you do, it's just not very productive. And Lord, right, old people. I mean, it's just you can't sell an old person, right? Because all you're doing is somebody's buying trouble. Oh, I got to have medical care, spend money. No. So and it's, of course, with the women, right? The prettier you are, the more you're worth. Now, the uglier you are, okay, you're gonna be out in the field. You're gonna be in this hot sun all day, picking cotton. But if you're pretty, you might be good enough to come into the big house.
Wait, Thomas Jefferson?
Right. Where the master and the master's sons have access to you. And of course, if the master has access to you, the mistress hates you. So when the master's not around, you're going to catch hell from the mistress. But that's what goes on. This is what you're looking at through this 1807 to 1861 period. And as you come into the Civil War, something like 93% of blacks are in the Confederacy. And of those who are in the Confederacy, 90% are slaves. So something on the order of 85% of the black people in the country as you come to the Civil War are slaves. They are free up north. Up north there is not slavery, but down south there is. And now we have this beginnings of war, right? Lincoln is elected president. You should read some of this. Really, Lincoln was one of the greatest orators I think we've ever had. And he was about as clear about his thinking as any person could possibly be. Lincoln's running. And the idea among the Confederacy, the people in the South, is that Lincoln's for abolition. Because Lincoln had said, right, a nation divided against itself cannot stand. Our nation is half free and half slave. And I do not expect the nation to split apart, but I do expect that the nation will cease to be half free and half slave. Well, if you're a slave owner, this sounds like a man whose ultimate plan is the end of slavery. So Lincoln gets elected president with the least of 38%. 38% of the popular vote. Lincoln was elected president with the least amount of votes of any president in U.S. history. He doesn't even appear on the ballot in the southern states. Not even on the ballot. Right? I mean, you just went through Obama's election. Imagine, Lincoln was so unpopular. There's no sense even campaigning in Mississippi, Arkansas, South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Louisiana, Texas. No even reason to try. Virginia. Lincoln gets elected. The South takes this as a sign that things in their country are going to go wrong. So they start their own country. They separate and start the Confederacy. Now, right, little told story, right? But if you're Confederates and you're waging this war and you think you're going to win, what do you think is going through their minds after they win? Said, okay, look, we want to start an empire. Their long-term goal, if they beat the North, was to conquer Mexico, go straight down the peninsula into South America, and create a Confederate empire. I mean, their plan was really, once they won that war, they were going to become the dominant force in the Americas. Well, the war gets started. The war gets started. And of course, you can imagine there are free blacks in the North who show up and say, look, we want to fight. We want to fight. And everyone in the North says, oh, no, you can't fight. You can't fight. Our people in the North, we're ready to fight a war to keep the Union together. But we're not ready to fight a war to end slavery. Here's an example I think you guys might be able to tap into. Think about Israel and our war in Afghanistan or Iraq, right? If you had gone to Israel, you said, look, we want you to fight in this war. The Israelis would say, great. We'll run it for you. Because we can't stand there. But what do we as Americans say? Oh, no, you can't fight this war. Because if you fight in the war, then the other Muslim countries are going to turn against us. Okay, the other Muslim countries can support us when we go into Afghanistan, when we go into Iraq, if the Israelis aren't part of it, but they hate you guys so much. There's no way that they're going to allow us to fight a war against Muslims if they see Jews as the primary beneficiaries. It was the same here. In the North, the agreement was, we are going to fight a war to keep the Union together, not to abolish slavery. So when the blacks volunteer to fight, no, we don't want you. This is going to be a white man's war. We do not want you. Well, what happens? The single most important thing, I think, for black people in the United States was when Abraham Lincoln went to Robert E. Lee and said, Robert E. Lee, you know Robert E. Lee? No, yes. He was the general who ultimately commanded the Confederate forces. Brilliant general, brilliant. Maybe the best military mind America ever produced. Lincoln went to him and said, I want you to run the Union Army. But Robert E. Lee was from Virginia, and his state of Virginia has succeeded and become part of the Confederacy. And Robert E. Lee said, no, I choose my state over my country. So he goes and heads to Virginia, where he's eventually going to become the commander of the Confederacy. That left Lincoln going to generals who basically didn't know what they were doing. Right? At the start of the Civil War, you have 20 million people in the North. You have 9 million in the South. And of their 9 million, 4 million are slaves. If Robert E. Lee had become the general of the North, it would have been a short war. It would have been a short war, the Union would have been put back together, and slavery would have continued to exist. But because Robert E. Lee left, this war goes badly for the North. It goes badly for the North for the first 2 years. It's just, this is, by the time this war is done, well, here it is. It's going to be this. 600,000 dead. 600,000 dead out of a population of 30 million, 2% of the people. 1 in 50 people are going to die in the Civil War. That would be tantamount to us fighting a war today where 6 million people get killed. Okay, imagine the concept of us fighting. Because we lost maybe 1,500 people in Iraq. Imagine if we fought a war where 6 million people were killed. That's the kind of thing that you're talking about there. They had single days where more people were killed in the Civil War on a single day than all of the American wars combined up to that point. If you go back and you look at the Revolutionary War, there was something like only 2,000 Americans were killed. But here in the Civil War, we're talking about 300 times that number, 600,000, 2% of the population. So this war was bloody, and it lasted a long time. And what happened? Lincoln, as does everyone else in the North, starts to change their minds. We are losing this war. We have to do something dramatic or we will lose this war, right? You are the president of the United States. Imagine being the president of the United States and your concern is that the country split during your presidency. So throughout history, you're going to be known as the person who split the country apart. It's not the reputation you want to have. What does Lincoln do? He decides to free the slaves. Three reasons. One, France, Great Britain, and Russia were all talking about coming in from Europe, intervening in the American Civil War with the view of separating the North from the South and the creation of two separate countries. All three of those countries, France, England, and Russia, had all recently abolished slavery. If Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation and frees the slaves, none of those countries are going to enter into the war because now they're entering into the war would be to support slavery. Second reason he does it, right here. 4 million out of the 9 million people in the South, 4 million are black. If you can deprive the South of their slaves, you can deprive them of their ability to fight the war. And the third reason Lincoln issues it, so that he can start to enlist black troops in the war. And by the end of the Civil War, look at this. By the end of the Civil War, 14% of the troops in the North were black. 25% of the Navy was black. Lincoln will say the black troops were the difference in the war. Okay, now let me see if I can explain this one to you. Abraham Lincoln says, government by the people, of the people, and for the people would have perished had it not been for the black troops. Whatever America becomes after 1865, it would not have become had it not been for those black troops. And you know the killer? Follow this. After that, 3 amendments are added to our U.S. Constitution. The 13th, which abolishes slavery. The 14th, which provides that blacks are now citizens of the United States. It provides, and you've got a right to keep the police from engaging in illegal searches and seizures. The press always talks about the right of freedom of the press in the First Amendment. That's where freedom of religion is at. That's where freedom of speech is at. Your right to assemble is in the First Amendment. You have a right to an attorney if you're convicted of or charged with a crime, right? You know about this. You've got a right to a jury trial if you're convicted, if you're charged with a crime, right? You've got another right that if you are sent to jail, the government can't use cruel and unusual punishment. Yes, right, yes. You can't be discriminated against, at least in theory, because of race, ethnicity, gender, right? All of those, you know where all of those rights come from? And I can give you a bunch more. But you know where all those rights come from? The right to bear arms, right? The right to buy guns. You know where all those rights come from? Do you know? The 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment. Right? If you look at the First Amendment, The very first words of the First Amendment of the Constitution say, Congress shall pass no law respecting establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise, prohibiting free speech, prohibiting the people from peacefully assembling. It says Congress. Because the entire Bill of Rights, those first 10 amendments to the Constitution, only apply to the federal government. If the state of Indiana said, look, we're going to say everybody in Indiana has to be Protestant, there's nothing in the Constitution that prohibited that until the 14th Amendment was passed. If the state of Indiana said you have no right to free speech, nothing in the Constitution prevented that until the 14th Amendment. If the state of Indiana said, you know what, rather than make our policemen have their own separate homes, we're going to make them live with you. There's nothing in the Constitution that would have prevented that until the 14th Amendment. All of those rights you have because black troops died in the Civil War to produce the 14th Amendment. Okay, I'm trying to demonstrate to you just how central my people are in this whole country, in this entire country. America's not what it would have been had it not been for us. Now then I start talking about the other thing, like the music, the jazz, the rap music, okay, the spirituals, the blues. I would start to talk about the basketball players, the football players, the golf players, the tennis players. I would start talking about the politicians, but the point I'm trying to make, we helped create this country. Now let's start talking about the betrayals of this country, right? I mean, I gave you the story of how we got here and how all of that happened. Even after the Civil War, you know, there comes this institution called segregation. Have you heard about this? You know, black kids got to go to the poor inner city school. You know, when I remember I told you I went to IPS. I went to Indianapolis Public Schools. When I went to Indianapolis Public Schools, they were segregated. I went to segregated schools in Indianapolis. All my teachers were black. All my other students in the school were black. I think I might be I think I was like in the 5th grade before I ever saw a white person in Indianapolis. We were betrayed by this country. We feel betrayed by this country. We feel, here's our experience, this incredible experience of oppression. Then this long period where we were enslaved. Then we come forward, save the country. 3 amendments are added to the Constitution. There were also 5 major civil rights bills that were passed in the 1860s and 1870s to protect us. All of those rights by 1900 are gone. We no longer have the right to vote in the South. Do you know when most black people got the right to vote? 1965. 1965. With the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. That's when most black people in America got the right to vote. The black males had the right to vote for this period during Reconstruction from about 1865 to maybe 1890. But then by the time you got to 1900, we'd all lost the right to vote. Except up in the North, and of course 90% of the black population lived in the South. So while you could vote in the North, we just weren't in the North. So we lost the right to vote. The very place, the very country that we had come and saved within a generation had segregated us, stripped us of the right to vote. And you don't understand, right? Segregation was more than that. It was, let me go back to this. I was the second black person in the history of the state of Indiana to work for a law firm of any size. So segregation was also this incredible limitation on jobs. And basically, we have very few black people who could be lawyers, who could be doctors, college professors. Oh man, it's almost amazing to say this. I was the first black person to get tenure at Indiana University School of Law, even though that law school was started in 1820. In 1820. So it took them 172 years before they made the first black person tenure. So we do this, and then what do we get in return? What do we get in return? We have the highest mortality rates, we have the highest incarceration rates, we have the highest poverty rates, our abilities to go to colleges are restricted. What we feel is that this is a country that has systematically oppressed us from the beginning. And it wasn't, right, if you go back to the original story, it was these Africans over here who then partnered with the Europeans, and it's really a conspiracy that creates the transatlantic slave trade. This is the anger in the black community. This is the anger that exists. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I can be more controversial than that, but I'm gonna stop there. Let's see if you guys have questions. You gotta have questions, right? Go ahead.
We're gonna go grab their lunches and have them eat while we ask.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So I need to eat something. But if you have questions now, please.
When you talk about tenure, you only talk about Indiana, but what about like all U.S. other Africans?
Yeah, let me tell you how bad it was. Okay, I'll tell you how bad it was. I came out of law school in 1982, and I became a professor in 1987. I'm sitting at a conference in 1990, okay, and we're looking at, there are 200, by that time there are 250 blacks who are teaching in law schools throughout the country. 170 law schools, 250. So you can see what that is, one and a half per school. And I'm starting to talk with my friends, and I went to Yale Law School. And of course, we come to realize a full 10% of the blacks teaching law were with me at Yale Law School during the time I was at Yale. 10%. But that's how bad it was. Okay, it's better now, but that's how bad it was. Oh, geez, and I came back. When I started, beyond 1987, you could count on one hand the number of Hispanic law professors. On one hand. One hand in the country of all 175 law schools. And this way, in some sense, you're watching an American society that's doing things it's never done before. Your futures are just unbelievably bright. When you look at the historic context, I'll give you another example. I was at a conference at Harvard Law School on school desegregation. And what I did was to present the Indianapolis school desegregation experience. So part of what I do is I go back and I show the changing demographics, race and ethnicity of the students in Indianapolis public schools. So in 1970, there were 108,000 kids in Indianapolis public schools. 108,000. Today there are 33,000. They go from 108 to 33. In 1987, when I'm talking about the numbers, there are no reported Hispanics in Indianapolis public schools. 20 years ago. Did you hear what I'm saying? Zero. Like, you look at it, there was 2% Asian. By this time, blacks were about 48%, and whites were 50%. Now, the whites pretty much fled. And Indianapolis is on its way to being a black, Hispanic school system, as you see in most of our urban areas. But I'm also saying this to say something else too. And see, this is what I think you saw with Obama's election, that if you, there's an undercurrent of this that you hear in the Republican Party, because Obama only won 40% of the white vote, 40%, yet he was elected president. Now that means he probably could have been elected president with about 38% of the white vote, because Obama got 95% of the black vote, he got 62% of the Asian vote, and he got 67% of the Hispanic vote. By the time we get to, let's assume he takes 2 terms, so by the time we're talking about the 2016 election, you might have somebody who get elected with less than 35% of the white vote. Now, I'll give you an example. Jimmy Carter, in 1980, was trounced by Ronald Reagan. He was trounced. Jimmy Carter, I think, won 1 state, and that was Massachusetts. He, a sitting president, and he was trounced. But Jimmy Carter got over 90% of the black vote. What happened was he only got 33% of the white vote. And the way this thing is shaping up, within a generation, 32 years, I want to say generation and a half, you go from a situation where if you only get 33% of the white vote, you get trounced, to if you only get 33% of the white vote, that's all you need to get elected. That's a change. I'm telling you, that's change.
Okay. You mentioned several betrayals. What would be the most disappointing thing about today's world?
The incarceration rates. The incarceration rates, because that's the beginning of everything. You know, well, yeah, sure, I'm 52 years old. So when I'm growing up as a young little black male, black males we were still the dominant force in the black community. If you were talking about the professionals, the doctors, the lawyers, there weren't a lot of us, but they were black males, the college professors, the high school teachers, organizations, we would run the organizations, we would organize the organizations. Then about 1980, late 80s, people started talking about what they call the crisis with the black males. And they started talking about the numbers of us going to jail, the number of single-parent families that black males are being brought up in, the poor performance in school. All of that is tied to going to jail, because that creates the domino effect that affects everything. Here's one thing that still just blows my mind. In the black community, 67% of the college degrees go to women. See, 2/3 go to women. So here's what we see. Right? If you're a black woman, you have a college degree, or Lord help you if you're a law professor, because they just don't get married. Because too many of them are going to jail. And then once you go to jail, man, you try to come out of jail with a felony and get a job? Oh, God. It ain't going to happen. My brother got convicted of felony. He didn't go to jail. Nonviolent felony, he didn't go to jail. Graduated from one of the top 5 law schools in the country. He's working, making $35,000 a year. I'm telling you, that's no money. You can't do anything with that kind of money. So that would be my first one. That's the beginning, it seems to me, of all of the other problems. I can give you a bunch of them. That's the number one. I'm gonna tell you something else. This is about white people. You know, they really truly believe that they are the smartest people in the world. I mean, the arrogance is unbelievable. You know, And we'll see this all the time, where we'll say something, then a white person says something, and then another white person goes, "Oh, that's a great thing to say. That's really intelligent." Of course, you just said the same thing, right? You know, wait a minute. And of course, being in academia, where you're a professor, where it's all about how intelligent you are, oh, you run into it all the time. I don't. Well, in fact, right. Let me go back to something. That Felipe told you about me. He said, "I'm trying to start a school to take kids." What you understand this? I am trying to start a school to take kids out of Indianapolis, halfway around the world, and educate them here. I mean, you got to think about how bad must I think the situation is here that I think the solution is to take them out of Indianapolis and educate them here. You know, do you, right? You know, when I get together with my friends and we talk about this, and they say, "Well, wouldn't it be better if they could go to schools in Carmel or in Westfield and Brownsburg?" I say, "You know, I agree, but it's easier for me to take them halfway around the world to get them bused in the Carmel." Why is that? Because the white people are not gonna let them come. Okay, I should stop. You guys got other questions? See, this is great. See, because academics, we talk about stuff, and it's a no holds barred kind of conversation. Right? Imagine you're talking to the guy who spent 23 years doing this, reading about it, writing about it, you know, talking at Harvard Law School, Duke, Virginia, everywhere. Book out, over 1,500 pages in print. In other words, I know what I'm talking about. You got other questions? Go ahead.
What are the major struggles you face during the whole process of getting your education?
White teachers. I don't think they consciously knew how to encourage me, or for that matter, I see that with most blacks. I think that a lot of, let me back up for a second. Do you know about unconscious racism? Have you heard that term?
Yeah.
Have you really? And white privilege, have you heard that term?
Yeah.
Okay. You do? Okay, see, I was part of the group that created those kind of terms. I mean, those kind of terms didn't exist until the early 90s. There was the concept of unconscious racism was first uttered in 1987. The concept of white privilege in 1992. So what we were dealing with were the good white teacher was like somebody who felt like they were doing charity work. It wasn't like they thought you were intelligent, but it was very condescending. It was like, you need our help. And I'm such a good person, I'm going to help you. But I dare say, I think throughout the whole process, in fact, I even tell you this. I went to what I would consider to be the best law school in the country. None of them understood the black experience. So if we tried to talk about the black experience, since they didn't understand it, it was wrong. You're wrong, you know? That's not how it works. And we're going, no, this is exactly how it works in our world. And like, well, there's something wrong with you. So I would say white teachers were, in education, they were probably the greatest problem. Yeah.
that white teachers were a problem in the aspect of education, right? So
Oh, yeah.
what would be, not just in education, but other things, not including.
What were other problems I had? Beyond the white teacher. It was a problem on the job. I mean, it almost always shows up as a job problem. It's a sense, you know, if I'm playing basketball, right? If I go out on the court and I'm playing basketball, white people gonna throw me the ball. Right, you know, I run down, hey, here come the ball. I might not even be looking for it, but here it comes. But now when you talk about a field where intelligence is gonna be the issue, I was an accountant. On the very first job as an accountant, I am working on the books of this auto company called Palmer Dodge. It used to be at 38th and Lafayette Road, so let me make sure, get that in there. And you know, I just came out of college. You know, I'm a hot shot. I mean, you know, I had an A- average. I passed a certified public accountants exam. I had 13 offers. I'm tough. And this is my very first week, right? I just said first week on the job, man. And this white woman who runs Palmer Dodge, she comes in there, she sees me, and she says to the white guy who's running it, if he's gonna be working on this audit, I'm gonna give me another accounting firm. And rather than my employer standing up and saying, well, then you'll just have to get another accounting firm, they transferred me. Okay, and the next day they said, look, Kevin, don't come here. We need you to go work on this government project. It was the same at the law firm too. And of course, as a professor. So the job was always an issue because it was about their perception of my intelligence. And that's one of the battles now. Now on the good side, I'm seldom hassled. You know, they say big black male. You're not gonna mess with him. Okay, so you know, I can go walk pretty much any place I want, people leave me alone.
At those schools, were you expected to speak for all black people?
You know, that was an interesting one. When I went to law school to become a professor, I knew I was going to teach law and education. And I was very much up in the air about what else I was going to teach. I had to pick another subject, and I knew I wanted to do law and education. And I actually was thinking about doing legal rights of minors, because it would fit with the law and education stuff. And then I had a colleague of mine in 1988, when Jesse Jackson was running for president, and he came to me and said, well, what do you think about Jesse Jackson saying that you guys should be called African Americans? And of course, I hadn't paid any attention to Jesse Jackson. I'm like, and I said something, but it became clear in that moment, you are the representative of black people, whether you like it or not. You know, you're going to speak for black people, and that's how other people are going to understand you as speaking for black people, whether you like it or not. So I accepted that reality. Now, of course, as a law professor, you know, I realized we don't have that many of us who are able to get through this educational system and do so well, that what I say, I understand I'm speaking for black people. I expect people to assume he's speaking for black people. So when I speak, I'm always consciously aware of that. And I tell you something else. So this is, see, when I was growing up, and this may be a little different for you guys, you were black. Okay, black might have been a good thing, it might have been a bad thing, but you were black. Nobody was going around saying, you're an individual, you don't have to speak for the race, you can be who you want to be. It was no, you were black. And if you do poorly, other black people will suffer. If you do well, and you show a good example, other black people will be helped by your example. But you are not an individual. You are a black person. So in some sense, I mean, I think I always understood that. And I tell you, here's what you can do. Ask somebody this. Ask them, describe yourself to me. And what you'll find is a lot of black people will say, well, I'm a black male student at Crispus Attucks High School. Which means they're saying, I'm black first. Okay, that is who they are. They're not someone outside of their race. Now you go ask a white person, who are you? And they'll say, well, you know, I go to this school, I'm so-and-so's son or daughter, I'm a Rotary member of the Rotary Club, but they won't say white because they're not defined by their race. They have a sense of an individuality we never had. It kind of kills me actually when I had to say I'm kind of shocked because I see this a lot with young blacks that in some sense they see race as not important, that somehow the battles that we fought were battles in the past, they don't exist today. And it is better. There's absolutely no question about it. It's not a little better, it's a lot better. But those battles are still there. I'd say the other problem is I'm doing well. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not doing a little well. I'm doing very well. You know, I have parties in my house just so I can show people how well I'm doing. Okay, understand that. I live in a $1 million house. I live on, I mean, literally, I mean, this is not a joke. I have my own private forest in Bloomington. I come out of my house and I have access to thousands of acres of wooded land and there's nobody there. I mean, I can come out of my house, I can walk with no clothes on, any place I want, you know, for 2 hours, and I would never come into a soul. I mean, I'm trying to tell you, I live well. But you ask me about my friends, you ask me about my relatives, you know, you ask me about my brothers. When you're black, most of the people you know who are black are really hitting the roof. You know, my daughter's gonna get married to a guy, and I was on the phone coming up here because the guy's cousin had gotten arrested. And I'm talking about arrested over some really, really bullshit. I mean, he was accused of, and he did. He stole an Xbox. Okay, he stole an Xbox out of a dorm room, and they had him on tape, on the videotape, walking with the Xbox. And the prosecutor, rather than saying, "Oh, this is just some little boys be boys stuff," just pay the guy the money for the Xbox and we'll forget about it. They wanted him to plead guilty to a felony, a Class D felony. Which, you know, you plead guilty to a felony now at 18, and that stuff's going to haunt you for the next 8 years. Well, yeah, 80 years, because you guys are going to have to work until you're almost 100. If you've been white, they just said, "Oh, this is the boys will be boys. Don't worry about it. Give the guy $500 for the Xbox and we'll get about it." So what you see is you see the racism. You see it every day. And in fact, the challenge is not to let it get you down. Right? I mean, the challenge is to say, okay, look, I see this, but life is still great. I mean, there's still all these other great things going on. And yeah.
How did you keep like the negativity from growing up and all that to stay focused and like inspiration?
I'm gonna tell you, see, Ray, I'm gonna tell you, that's the battle, right? I'm gonna tell you, that is the battle, you know.
You did wrote that earlier, right?
Yeah. See. Well, I want to say that, but look. Let me take Obama. Let me take the election of Obama, because you know I had conversations with black people, and we knew this going in. With Obama, you could say shoot, just cause these white people see if they were gonna vote for somebody black, it gotta be the biracial guy with dad's from Kenya. They not gonna vote for one of us. They gonna go vote for the whitest black guy they can find. And you could say that, and you could go, yeah, that's that, or you could say, man, I can't believe that they would even vote for him. And they did. I mean, this is a great country. You see what I'm trying to say here is you could look at it either way. You really could look at it either way. Now, I think for me, I'm gonna tell you what the breakthrough was for me. It was in I can give you the exact day. It was Christmas Day, 1996. Because I'm on a 6-hour ride on Christmas Day, and I'm in India. You understand India, right? All the way over there. And India is one of the poorest countries in the world. I mean, there's so many people live on the streets in India. There's no concept of homelessness. In fact, I'll tell you how bad it was. I'd be driving into Delhi in the cab, and I'd see this family. There'd be a man and his wife and his 2 kids, and they're eating soup on the sidewalk. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great. The family is having a meal together. Right? It's not occurring to me that these people are homeless because there's so many people who are homeless there. It's just a natural thing. So I am talking to this woman about just how oppressed black people are in America. And then it dawns on me, look how poor these people are in India. Here people, God, what can I say? Open sewers. No, I'm sorry. India is so bad. In India, 30% of the people are below the poverty level, and they define poverty as having enough food to eat. Right? They didn't define it as how much money you had, but how many calories were in your diet. So what happened to me was I gained perspective. And I gained a lot of perspective. Indeed, one of the reasons I want to take the black kids here, this is another reason, is I want them to give them more perspective. I want them to say, okay, look, if you really look, right, because a lot of you, I assume, have left the country. This is, yeah, and have been and traveled through the developing world. Okay, well, if you travel through the developing world, you know what I'm talking about. Because, Americans have so much, but they don't understand it, they don't realize we live so well compared to the rest of the world. So for me, it was perspective, but I would say that is the big battle. One of the biggest battles I think you fight in life is one of not looking at things in a negative light and looking at them in a positive light. Because I'm almost say, that's going to be the key to your entire life. Because whatever happens to you in this life, some of it's going to be bad. Indeed, my guess is a lot of it's going to be bad. But it's how you look at it that's going to make all the difference in the world. And you can look at stuff, a lot of times, not everything, right? I mean, if you lose a son, I mean, that's just no good way to look at it. Well, you can be grateful that you had him. But a lot of it's going to be how you look at it. So I work constantly on my attitude, and every time I feel like I'm not appreciating what I have, then I know it's time to leave and go someplace where people are really struggling, and then come back.
That's a good question, Bobby.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm right. I'm sorry. He's not really black. I'm sorry. So he's biracial.
It was funny to me because as Latinos, we think that we assume that we automatically get along with blacks, so that blacks will automatically should trust us. And the truth is opposite. They shouldn't trust us. Because most of us Latinos, especially if we're successful, we don't think like the indigenous that we come from. most of us were honorary whites. We
Yeah.
have internalized white supremacy issues, and we treat ourselves worse than others.
I mean, the black notion on Latinos and Latinos, we are not certain. We are not certain where many of you stand, because there are many Latinos, who want to assimilate. I used to run the program that brought the high achieving black and Hispanics to the Bloomington campus. So I actually had in my program 1/3 of the Hispanics on the Bloomington campus. They had 25% of the blacks, but I had 1/3 of the Hispanics. And there were quite a few Hispanics who would come up and tell me, I only check the box so I can get the money for the scholarship. But I don't speak Spanish, I don't think of myself as Latino, I never crossed my mind. So I think we don't know. I think we don't know. Now, I'll say this about being in Indiana. Before I say this, I'm gonna preface this story so you understand, right? Because I told you I grew up here. I grew up in Indianapolis. In 1992, I went to the University of Texas at Austin to teach. And you're right, you're in Austin, Texas. I drove down to San Antonio. Right? There's a lot of Latinos down there, right? I come back up here in 92, 93. I'm talking to my friends going, man, did you know, man, in Texas, they got all these Latinos down there. I just didn't know what to say. I mean, they weren't black. They weren't white. They were just people. You know what I mean? But it was an unbelievable concept, because there really were no preconceived notions. Now, I don't know what your experience is, because things are starting to change. But for me, somebody coming from here, you just never thought about it. We had blacks, we had whites, we had Jews, okay? But we didn't have Latinos. So it wasn't like anybody had any thoughts about them. Oh, okay, all right.
But that thing you said, perspective intelligence, right? Do you see it more, less or more than before you had started your first job and now today?
I see it less only in this sense. As you get older, people do actually treat you better. I mean, this is one thing I really have noticed. As I have gotten older, people do treat me better. That's one of the reasons I don't take all the gray out of my beard. Because I want people, and a lot of times they say, yeah, I'm 52 years old. Really? Oh, okay, all right, well, I need to give you some respect. But more to the point of your question, I don't think there's any question that things have improved. And I'll take you back to, when I was your age. When I was your age, white girls wouldn't date you. White girls wouldn't date you, or because they had it in their mind that there's something about black people, and if they were ever with a black person, somehow they felt like they were going to be polluted in their soul. So white girls wouldn't date you, or if they would, the parents wouldn't let them do it. Today we got West Indians in this country. We had Ghanaians, we had Nigerians, we got black immigrants. Understand this. We got black people who said, I want to go to America, and America let them in. In my day, that didn't happen. Okay? Here's an example. In 1970, 1% of black people were foreign born. And that was the highest it had ever been in history. That is voluntary immigrants. I'm not talking about slavery. In 2005, 8% of blacks were foreign born, which is to say two things happened. They wanted to come.
What percentage in 70?
1.1%. Two things happened. They wanted to come, and America let them in. Historically, America did not let you in if you were black. They said, oh, you did, no. Oh, no, you can't come. No. Of course, they say we don't want to come because we don't want to be segregated and treated badly. So that wouldn't have happened. What I'm trying to say is that is not a small change. That's a huge change. And it was the same with Obama. You know, the night of the election, I had a party for black people. Okay, right? Because I sat there and you know, I'm talking with my friend. I'm going, okay, look, we need to have our own party because you know the white people could get in those ballot booths and they'll go, "He really black. I can't vote for him. I got to vote for McCain." So we knew there was a possibility that though the polls had him up, and most black people were saying that if he's not up by 10 points in the poll, he's going to lose. Because once they get into the ballot box, they may have said we're going to vote for Obama, but they go, I can't do it. So we had a party just with black people because we knew if we were in an integrated party with white people and they said McCain won, we would all be really angry at every white person we knew. Okay, because we would know what happened. So we said, look, let's not mess up our careers. Let's just have a party for ourselves. But that's also.
And what makes you different, other than your degree and your experiences?
No. You have a lot of what happens in life is stuff you can't control. I mean, I hate to say it, but I see it all the time. I see people who spend a tremendous amount of time working as hard as they can. For some people it happens and the hard work pays off. For other people, they just work hard and it doesn't seem to ever really pay off. So the real truth of the matter, hard work is not a guarantee that it's going to pay off. But what it is it increases your percentage. It increases the probability that it's going to pay off. See, the reason I guess what I'm trying to convey is, I'm not going to treat you like, in some sense, I'm not going to say to you what I should, because what I should say to you is, oh, work hard, and everybody works hard, it pays off. Because the reality is it doesn't. But that's not why you work. Huh?
And so does intelligence.
It's the same. I mean, it's the same. For a lot of intelligent people, sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. But the reason you work at it is because when it does come to you, right. Let me back up for just a second. When I say I was the second black person to work at a law firm or the first one to get tenure at Indiana University, right? It's not like there weren't other smart, intelligent, dynamic black people who could have done this before me. Of course there were hundreds of thousands of them. But the society had to change, and those individuals had to change so that they got to the moment where they said, look, well, let's try it this time. And that's where my hard work paid off. My hard work paid off because the opportunity came. Sometimes the opportunity doesn't come, but when the opportunity comes, you have to be ready. And that's really why you work hard. But I'd almost say with you guys, there's such a change that's going to go on, not just in this country, but in this entire world. And you're beginning to hear this, and you heard a little of this about Obama going to Russia, where the Russians were saying, well, we're not all that excited about the American president coming because after all, it's America who's responsible for our economic problems now. And when you start looking at all of those bank officers, the Goldman Sachs, the Morgan Stanleys, the Citibanks, the Bank of America, and you start looking at the guys who failed, they were the white males. I mean, effectively what we sat and watched was the white male structure of thinking and organizing the world that failed. And over the long haul, that's going to be a problem that I don't think they're going to be able to overcome. I think what you're going to see, and in some sense you're already beginning to see it, is a depreciation of the white male mentality. They are the ones with their greed that has literally collapsed the entire economic system of the world. And this is not a short-term problem. You know, this is not one that we're through next year or we're through the year after that, or no. I mean, everybody who's really looking at this is saying, they're saying a long time because they're afraid to tell you they don't really see an end yet. And who's to blame? It's Citibank, it's George Bush, it's Bank of America, it's Morgan Stanley, it's Dean Witter, it's the white males. So in a way, you're going to start to see a shift away from that way of thinking to a totally different one. Actually, I would say for you guys ought to be excited. I mean, you really truly ought to be, because in a way, you're going to have a chance to make a world as close to the way you want it as any other group of humans have ever had in all of humanity. First, things are happening so much faster. You know, with the instant access, you're connected to people. You know, kind of go back 200 years ago. Somebody wanted to send a letter from Europe to America, they had to put it on a ship. That meant everything happened a lot slower. But now it's instantaneous. And I even see this. I see that I have one daughter who's 27, 25, then I have 17 and 15. And there's not 10 years difference between them. It really is more like 20, 25 years, because things are happening so much faster. Now, the good thing from your standpoint is it means you're going to be able to do a lot more. And man, I mean, you got to think about it. All of these people who, if you come to me and say, what is it that higher education